for illumined life to be birthed into form. I am the truth. I am the light. Illumined, beloved divine. So hello there everyone, and welcome to this video with me here today. As I've recently shared with all of you here in the public realm of this domain of sharing on YouTube, I wouldn't be as frequently recording videos as previously because the level of my work is simply shifting, and I'm shifting. But there was a period of a few months, around half-year timeline, that I really needed for myself for this inner shift to occur, because what I feel now is I'm only going to bring through most important information, but not the work itself. As I've already shared with you, will be on Patreon on my Illumined Ascension group devotional work for those who really want to step on the initiatory path of the Christ, which is the principle of God and how God creates, our own personal mastery, and Illumined Union, right? So that's available there. But today, this important topic came through as the next wave of sharing, because it's actually something I already have been discussing in waves, because we do these Illumined Union updates and transmissions on Patreon for those devotees who really want to establish and create an Illumined Union and Illumined partnership within themselves and their sacred partnership. And I've been talking about this before, but never publicly before. But this is a big, profound transmission and understanding and knowing that now needs to move into the sphere, what we call the collective, at least those who are willing to listen and pay attention. It is so important. And as you know, this was the hardest part of my work, is to talk about these things. First uncovering them myself, then talking about them, because I think it's a kind of hard job. I think no one speaks about these things, and sometimes it's uncomfortable and unpleasant, but someone has to do it. And fortunately, it is me, it is I, Polona, Aurea. So it will be another very important subject and topic, because as you know, the transgression phenomena has been recurring, and it's not just for myself when I consciously went into that, but now I'm noticing this sphere of change in my work when people who come to me for personal one-on-one work with sessions that I do through spirit, is that people who are coming are having these similar issues, okay? So today's topic is all about these partnerships, right? And the hijacking of these partnerships. As you can see in the title itself, right? The replacements, the reversals, or the inceptions or incepted unions that are meant to replace true destined partnerships and the path of Illumined Union, which we create first within ourselves and then with the counterpart. And you have to know that there's levels and levels of what we call union, and there's people on different levels of this journey. And some partnerships are still very much about learning how to come in your sovereignty as the Christ, and other partnerships, people who are very much in the sacred, holy level. These spirit unions are not easy to attain and be brought forth in the physical. And I'll be talking more about that. And first time ever, I will also here publicly reveal my own experience with this, because I think it's time. And I think it's time to present to you how these transgressors and the dark forces, or forces of the devil or antichrist, are playing with people, are playing and toying with them, like, you know, we don't have our own will, like we can't choose our partnerships, and they're trying to mess with our unions that are divinely orchestrated. These unions are of God. So God in the first hand, right, has the only true word to say here. And those of us creating these partnerships, we've always felt a sense of holiness and sacredness. And it's something that was so sacred to us that we didn't really allow a lot of outside infiltration, right, to come in between us and the union. But interferences were still occurring. And I'm going to talk to you about my example as well. But first things first, before I start today's subject, I do have an automatic channeling. It's a writing that I did with or through Aurea in connection. You know, these are beautiful devotional spirit beings, basically my heritage, my divine spirit partners in crime, basically aspects of myself, higher aspects of myself. And when I walk this physical plane, I have their entire seed within them. So everything I experience, their consciousness moves through me. And it's the consciousness that I had that was always intact that made me discern between the falsehood or the counterfeits of these unions and the truth. And a lot of people don't have such a strong radar. So we're going to go through this. And I think it's important for people because we are now in the time of union. For most people who were stepping on this path, I'm not talking about the people who haven't even begun with their own personal healing work. There's people who are still in the karmic level. And I will also mention some more about the word karmic, which is not such an easy understanding of the word that we're told, and we're trying to understand it from a lesser awareness. It's not such an easy energy, okay, to understand. So I'm going to be talking about this as well. But this is truly, you know, for some people difficult because they don't have the kind of background. For me, it's much easier because I came with this direct understanding and feeling of the sacred love. So everything that was not of that vibration was for me, no. You know, it's like, no, I'm going to refuse it. And that's how you truly feel the beloved. You feel through that love, okay? So we're going to talk about that and as well, how to connect with that essence space and not go for things of the outside nature, which can be always influenced, right? We've talked about this in the previous videos. I think it's really important, if you haven't watched the previous video, for you can have a better understanding of this one. The reason why this triggered me so deeply is because someone actually came to me recently with a request to assist them, right, and their situation. I'm not going to talk about people's situations, but in general, I will talk about the things that came through that writing that were really deeply already in my soul, because I was having similar experiences myself at a different level, but still. And it gave me a lot of understanding because as I walked through these levels of transgression, each time I had to unveil a portion, I had to unpackage a new level, okay? And so each level brought me to a new level of, wow, you know, transgression and inception go way big. They go so deep, and uncovering this means we have to go through both shadow and light cycles. So these cycles are very unpleasant because we would always, as light beings, we want to be in these high cycles when we're elevated and we're constantly triggered by the impulses of divine light, and we want to create in this way. But then there's shadow cycles, these darker cycles through which we purge, and when we move through the darkness, we gain an understanding of it. There's no other way to learn and grow. People who are still refusing their healing, and healing has to move through both states of the polarity, they're still very stuck. And they're stuck in this so-called, what I mentioned, karmic energy. The word karmic is not simply, oh, you know, you're in this lower level and you're still learning lessons. The word karmic, again, has different levels. There's different levels to understanding the karmic. There's a karmic, which is more of an innocent version, right, of souls playing out their lessons and trying to learn to basically come more into their divine essences instead of these lower human traits, right, that are based on greed, jealousy, envy, comparison, all these lower traits, right? The lesser or the lowest emotions, such as, what is the lowest emotion? I can think of it now because I'm never in it. Seriously, is when you feel like this deep sense of, wow, why can't I think of it right now? Why can't I think of the word? Well, it's going to come in its moment, right? This is a spontaneous video, as all my transmissions are. Guilt. Oh, yeah, of course. It always comes like this to me, you know, when trying to think it. It's guilt, right? Guilt and shame. These are probably the lowest in the frequency. And people who have been refusing their healing, they were actually more and more tapping into the levels that we call karmic, through either relationships or their situations, whether it's jobs or in their parent communities, friendships, doesn't matter, alliances they go into. And the more they actually rejected their healing and were ignorant to it, even if they were brought forth healers and people trying to show them the path of their higher calling they can choose, right? it's going to be more and more difficult. The word and what we understand under the word karmic is just deepening, and it's going deeper and deeper. And it's not as innocent, because now the word karmic includes deities and principalities and basically entities of fallen angelic beings who are messing and coming into these connections, and they're actually pulling and creating these hooks that people have, and these hooks come in between their relationships. They're being played out. So a lot of times people think, oh, I'm just, I'm a person, I still have lessons to learn, I'm still healing, but they're actually being stuck and stagnant. They're in this constant stagnation mode, right? This crossroad that they never can actually break through and move into the next spiral of their life. They can't initiate a new cycle, so they're always stuck in this status quo reality. What this means is that somehow in between, if they prolong a specific amount of repeating of the lesson, the density of their vibration will be so low, especially when these feelings of guilt and shame, because there's a lack of self-love there in connection to God, which is, you can't have a connection with your soul if you don't connect to God. Basically, it's how it is. And I've been seeing a lot of people wanting their own soul connection, but they can't have it because they don't have reverence to God. And that's one and the same, okay? So you think you might be connected, but it's basically just lower mental states, giving an emulation or impersonation of what you believe is your soul, but it's not a direct connection, right? So when they were prolonging it inevitably, like indefinitely, in this way for so long, the energy condensed so much that at a certain point these souls couldn't directly connect to their soul. So somehow in between they got hijacked, right? This means that these entities, these higher principalities, these fallen forces have basically said, okay, you're not doing anything about it, so I'm going to claim an aspect of your will that you're not using. And so what we now know under the word karmic here is that they're karmic energies that are not just karmic as in learning lessons. That's still normal, right? But this is encircled energy that eventually is just harder and harder to break through. And eventually a soul is so stuck, either within themselves or their jobs or in a partnership that's a deeply stagnant partnership that's not leading them anywhere. And basically it's two people hooked together, and basically they no longer have a relationship with each other. But there's a third energy, right? And this energy manipulates these people. What does this mean? It means that their density, that their inaction and non-usage of what God calls your sovereign free will becomes more of an abused version of free will. So these entities come in between. And now you have seen so many people doing readings, and everyone now talks about third parties, or is karmic and is someone who's taking your beloved partner away. And it's not like that. In most cases, yes, but in most cases when it gets really, really toxic, there's a third energy present, and it's not physical. It's not an embodied person. That's still very low level. If you think, oh, we can't be together because our parents don't want us to be together, or there's someone who's in conflict with us, or they're against the union. No, these karmic energies are more sinister. They're very dark. And they're basically not just claiming over a person and their identity, but they start claiming eventually more and more over their unions, right? And so it's like claiming the way they are, and this person stays more and more stuck and stagnant. It's very difficult for people to accept these things, but they are as they are. And like I said, I have a difficult task of presenting the things that no one wants to talk about, and most people don't even know the phenomena. They don't understand it, how deep it goes. But I've been going through waves of exploring and experimenting myself within my own consciousness, seeing what transgression does. And it's not as easy to be taken with. People take it lightly. They think, oh, if I don't do anything, well, maybe the energy will just go away and it will shift. In no case, way, shape, or form. The transgression, this volatile energy, this invasive energy, it's a parasite. And it won't go away. It won't just go away. So people think, oh, if I go to a healer to cut the cords, it'll be all okay. No. Because first and foremost, someone needs to really know the phenomena. Most healers don't. This is not a normal, addiction to a certain person or whatever it is. When these energies can come in between and they kind of outgrow themselves, they kind of overgrow you, the person often won't even recognize anymore what's their own will and what's not. So they think they're walking their path. They think they're living their soul, but it's not. And it's very sad. when you're looking at people, even people who, let's say, in my case, that you once knew and they were a certain way, and now you just see how this energy is taking them more and more further away from themselves, and it's getting very complex. And people have different reasons for that, okay? And we'll talk about this as well. But let me just say, I wanted to start with the word karmic because it's very misinterpreted. There's levels. And karmic lessons, these are lessons that a soul hasn't learned, that they just keep on repeating it. And each time, each cycle, their energy of will, the will of God, gets weaker and weaker. What is weakness? It's inability to make the movement. So basically, you might be thinking in your mind, I need to do this, I need to do this, but the energy itself is eventually so invasive, it kind of prevents you to keep on moving forward, okay? What this means is that the consciousness of overall awareness hasn't moved, and it can no longer move through your cellular prism of life. There's a complex nature to understanding the nature we're built, we're created through source, and the prism of life. So I don't go into this here. This is all in my teachings. And the last spiral teachings is actually about building and creating a constant interflow of dynamic life force movement through the prism of life that each creation being, each angelic version of ourselves has intact, and we need to restore that. There is no ascension without that. There's no physical ascension and resurrection if you don't come into your true union with the self, which is the configuration of your source self, which is the prism of illumined creation core that you have. So when these things happen, the soul starts to revolve around the core of that transgression energy more and more. So it's like gaining momentum more towards that energy, and it's lessening the magnitude of its own axial spin, which is spinning, we're meant to spin around our own core, right? It's very complex to understand. I'm not going to go into it here because my public YouTube audience usually doesn't have enough understanding to know what I'm talking about, which basically guides them away from the content. So the knowledge, has to be built gradually. You can't just gain information and then, oh, what's this about? You have to gradually gain awareness about things, because it's not about knowledge information, right? It's about awareness. Awareness is a dynamic relationship you have with specific information or knowledge, right? And it can't something just be channeled. It has to be deeply integrated and embodied. This is what all my teachings are about, because they're lumen teachings. So there was recently this realization, and it hit me. There was a strong trigger, and I just knew, yeah, this is the next level of phenomena I need to talk about, because it's being brought forth to me through these people, individuals, and these star-born people. Now I'm finally having understanding, because as I was going through these waves of transgression, just this last wave, because we just had a full moon in Virgo, it was a huge release, and then right afterwards was the equinox point, and for me it was a huge release, and it was like this final layer of this transgression that I didn't understand why is this happening. And then this person comes to me, and I'm like, oh, that's why, because I already explained to you that me as a version, as an extension of Aurea's consciousness, I came here intentionally, purposefully, but also with the hidden agenda of my own as a light being. And this agenda was to it wasn't an agenda that's, malevolent, it's benevolent. And this agenda is uncovering all these hidden ways through which transgression works and operates, expose them, and this way pave the way for all the starborn beings, because a lot of them were deeply stuck in this, and they didn't themselves see clearly anymore what's truly happening, right? So we needed a new influx, new light beings who were looking at this from above, and then them coming on earth to say, look, this is what's happening. You've been here for such a long time. You haven't noticed the phenomena. Because when you're on earth in a specific amount of time, even if you're a star being, the veil will thicken, and the veil has been thickening for quite a long time until this, right? The grip of the matrix and the hologram was, as a construct, truly placed intact, and then it was very, very difficult for these beings to see, right? So my nature was to go through these experiences to help others, and when I liberate these expressions of transgression, when I notice them and how malevolent and how inorganic they are, I can only, by illuminating them through the dark, that's why I had to travel through so many dark pathways to see this, then it can bring them to the surface, talk about them, publicly expose them, but that first means bringing them to God, and then see how this will benefit to those beings who themselves are having challenges with this, okay? So I will present you the automatic writing, but before I do that and we discuss this further, I want to just briefly share my own level of where I am currently. I'm actually now shown, I'm moving already away from the transgression phenomena in my own life. I'm actually completing it. It's kind of in its final stages for me. I've gained so much mastery. I can't even explain how much I understood about the phenomena. The personal routines and the way I go about my embodiment right now, it's just making such a profound change. I no longer feel these electric impulses and pain so much, right? But recently what happened exactly on the equinox, this was right when the release occurred through the full moon. My mother told me she was in the forest and she had a spontaneous transmission with the master Lamayan. It was nothing specific, you know. These transmissions with light beings, they're never about knowledge or getting a specific information, but they're always bringing a greater overview of things, right? So Lamayan came through, and he's an incredible being. I mentioned him before. He's a light being himself, and he was on Earth. And for the first time ever, he actually explained to my mother, because she was still a little confused. He said he knew me first from before, because we're all light beings, but he only got to know her through me. And he's basically transmitting or channeling through her, because I have my own path, I have my own work. And he said to her something so profound, it left such an impact. He said, he's always like this, he's in awe, and he says, I can't believe the incredible being that is Polona Aurea. He says, she's achieved more than anyone has ever achieved before. And he said, people still don't know that there is no messing around with the lumen light beings. He said, because once they set their goals, they will achieve them. A lot of dark beings, the fallen angelics, they don't know that. They don't take us seriously. Why? I will actually explain this in the next video, because I have another topic I wanted to do first, but then this came in between and it felt more important. But that topic will be about being the child of God. And I'll explain this, and I'll explain the two realms and this whole history that I mentioned already, but it will be through the eyes of God as the child aspect. So these beings don't understand. They don't understand us no more, because they separated long ago, eons ago, and they don't know why we're so successful in what we do and what makes us be as we are. And sometimes they become very obsessed with our work. But recently, as I went into the next level of my work, I realized, because a lot of this transgression and then inception that occurred, I saw steps before it. And I actually saw a version that I never saw before. And this was a new level, profoundly revealed to me. And I saw basically how it was the lumen light beings that gave the impulse to the darkness, to the dark ones, and they thought, wow, this impulse is my idea, it's my idea. But you know what? Before incepting, before playing and doing this inception work, they themselves were incepted now. This is a new cycle. And I'm seeing how this was actually our project, and I'm laughing because it's so true. I actually saw how Aurea, before coming here, creating a version, an extension that is me, it's like, oh, let's reverse them now, right? So they will think they got their own ideas, what they need to do, how they will transgress. So everything about my life specifically, my embodiment, they were actually given instructions. They thought it's their sinister ideas, it's their plans, it's their evil scheming, but it was actually Aurea. And they were incepted by us before they started incepting our human vessels, right? Our physical extensions. So what occurred is that there was a gradual dissemination and dispensations that I came into awareness through these experiences when they were first incepted by us, the Illumined groups, and then they thought these are their ideas, and then they started incepting our physical extensions, right, or human embodiments. And then Lamayan said, he said that I'm growing and I'm now a living human shield, that just by coming so much in my own power, that I'm just a natural magnetic shield. I'm just repelling these energies, and I'm noticing in my body just like moving further and further away from this energy. And I talked to you about this, and I made a transmission on Patreon when God explained to me these realms will just come and be in touch for a very short time. Then the Illumined realm will start to move away. This also means that Illumined beings as a presence on earth will be gone after the cycle, which means their seed was brought here, and then we will see how the seed will play out through the next creation cycle wave, okay? But the interesting thing that he said, that these are groups of beings, and I know because I have my own group, and they're very powerful beings, but they're powerful in their usage of gods, right? This God intelligence that is the principle of Holy Trinity and the Christ, okay? So our understanding of this is also the coupled union, and how important this is for us or our human counterparts or our human embodiments to complete the mission of ascension. So what I've already talked about before, it is crucially important that the next stage of this mission for everyone going the Illumined Union pathway comes into the right coupledom, or the right sacred marriage, or the right hieros gamos for them. Unfortunately, the dark entities, the dark beings, have been messing with it. They've been playing with us, okay? So I've recently, by doing my own inner work, came across a lot, like literally a lot of distortions that I had to pick up. And they were sometimes random awakenings, you know, happening through my whole body as I was remembering things. Sometimes I listened to someone speak and it was triggering me, something, a word, a sentence. And basically, I detected a presence, right? And this presence was a compulsively obsessive being, and this being has a name, but I won't mention his name. It is a he, it is a masculine being who was, before this separation occurred in the family of light, when those who went against God, who betrayed God, went the other way. And these beings, right, they no longer operated through divine trinity of life, and they did not want to be the child of God. They did not even want to be a child. You know, a huge part of God is this infinite child, an infant that's always playing with creation. If you don't see that aspect of God, if you don't see that aspect of yourself, you're not going to be ever a full being. This is where self-love really comes from, that aspect that is the child, and that's going to be in the next video. But I saw this being, I detected this presence, and he was very compulsively obsessive being, obsessed with Aurea, me as a spirit being, and my work, and my charm, and my charisma, and everything. And he needed to understand how I work, how I do. So basically, my entire life, he was spying on me. But the way his energy on earth manifested is through people who were obsessive about me, like stalkers, or people's male, right? Not only males, sometimes even females who are obsessed even with me, and like trying to almost sometimes be me, like emulate me. And it was a very dark obsessive energy. And sometimes these people just walking their life, they didn't know that these entities have a big power. They can overpower you like instantly, because they're more powerful as long as you don't fully awaken yourself to the child of God that you are. And that's going to be in the next video, because it is in itself a very big specific topic, so I can't put it all in one framework. And until you are in that aspect and your love for the self is complete and whole, these energies will be able to infiltrate. And the worst part of infiltration is that people who are very stubborn, ignorant, they think, this has nothing to do with me, that would never happen to me, I'm so much the boss, I am the emperor or the empress. And people who are usually the most refusing of this truth are usually the worst in it. They're like used as puppets on a string, they're manipulated, they have sometimes even entities. We're going to talk about sexual predators and entities as well. I mentioned this before in my readings here on YouTube, but I'm not sure how many people truly understand the profound impact. Because you have to wake up that there's first a spirit realm, and then there's a physical play out. And that these beings are ancient, and they're very sinister. And they can overpower anyone's will until your will is one with God. And until you're fully unified with the will of God. They can take you, they can get you anywhere. And a lot of people, when they accumulate these entities, energies, these distorted versions, right? They get them somewhere, and they get them through vulnerabilities and inconsistencies in their own embodiment, usually lower human traits when you're not fully whole, lack of self-love, and not truly understanding and worshiping the divinity that is God. And the moment you're no longer in God, with God, you weaken in your frequency, and then it shows in your vibration and then your embodiment, right? Because this is all one and the same. So people who are still now very stuck in low frequencies, these people are usually the ones that are very stuck in this phenomena, because what we knew as karmic from before, and we were told in these soul channelings, like, oh, it's just people playing out their lessons, and that's all there it's about, that's what karma means. No, the new karmic, the sinister karmic, is when there's always a third party, and it's always an entity, and it's a powerful spirit that will begin to first play with you, then mess with you, and so on. You know, it's like with people who have entity possessions. It's never a full-on possession at first, right? It starts as an entity attack, and, you know, if you show weaknesses, and you're in victim mentality, and you have lower human traits, and you don't go to God, and you are truly one with God, then these energies will be more and more persistent and then invasive and then pervasive. And as you know, what we resist persists. So it takes a while from someone to have an entity around them influencing their reality to a full and entity possession. That's the state of complete loss of will. And that's what these beings want, because remember, they were evicted from the so-called paradise, from the heavenly realm. So they were put here, they were placed here, and until then they're searching for bodies to inhabit because they can have them themselves. So they're trying to find ways. And remember when I channeled about transgressors, right? They were trying to create a vehicle of great avatar-like features through which they could demonstrate the Luciferian consciousness, okay? So people who are still very much in refusal to this, you know, I have people who watch my videos and get the information, they're like, yeah, that's just a make-believe, you know? These people are the most threatened. Because if you don't start asking yourself what is really going on here, and you see it in our realm, I watch, I observe, and I've seen an increase, a rise of this so-called twin flame obsession in the last few years. It went from this to mediocre, like minor to mediocre to like this, exponentially. And how many people do you actually know what a true twin flame means? What that means? It's a consciousness. And it's a consciousness of unity. It's two flames as one. And now what people call the twin flame is usually what we're going to read in the channel writing. It's a distortion, and it's just a karmic energy. And how many people are influenced this way and told a lie? Why? Because these beings don't want people to come into true unions. True unions are lasting unions because they're about love. Do you think that a so-called twin flame or divine counterpart or partner, yours, mine, whoever's, it's all the same. A divine partnership that is of God, that is true union. Do you think it's about mental manipulation, playing games, distortions, on and off, hot and cold, hurting one another or each other? Do you think that's what it's about? Lies, deceit, hiding things, not communicating? Now you have all these readings. Why is your person not communicating with you? What do they want to tell you? And you have people channeling other people's energies. Well, I always say to people, if you want to know, ask them. If they're still not telling, leave them. Because that's the person. The person itself should be communicating with you. And then people have these readings. What is your person trying to tell you? But they're not communicating. Well, if they're not communicating, they're not your person, right? Or something's off here at least. And we have to start thinking in terms of discerned and empowered awareness, not delusional stories. But sometimes it's difficult. And today in the reading, we're going to start to understand why it's so difficult to break through this and why people are so stuck in these playing games mentality. And I've experienced this myself, so that's the reason why I can honestly tell you I've been through it and I'm out of it. And because I'm out of it, I can now tell you the truth from a higher perspective and reality, okay? So the reason, because I'm separating myself with this transgression energy. I can also help others better. I can do these sessions. Before I couldn't, right? Because I was still in myself. I was in it in different parts. And it took me, let's say, 2.5 years to do the full healing and to gain the knowledge, information, understanding, but then also how to apply it, how to demonstrate it for the full embodiment. And to be, you can't escape these things or the reality, but what you can be is you become an instigator when you're embodying your will of the Christ and the principle of cosmic Christ, of Illumined truth, that no sinister force, whatever it thinks itself to be, whatever it considers itself, how powerful it is, it can't do anything against you. But they're trying to prevent these true unions, these true matches to come together because there's such love that is emanated. Do you understand that the divine union means that this is like God and two beings as one? This is nothing but love, loyalty, and devotion. And the way that you feel the beloved, like within you, I've been always communing with my beloved like this. It's a feeling, it's an essence. It's not a story, it's not a game and like mental thinking, thoughts. It's not. That's not love. That's cold. And it's manipulation. And there's levels, okay? I'll explain it in the writing. But you have to know the words divine, illumined union, what do they mean? They mean utter love, utter respect, utter devotion. When two beings are like that, there's two Christ, each first sovereignly independent in that essence, and then they can be together in that space. Until then, I don't know. You have different beings, karmic soulmates, you can learn lessons through, whatever. But there's this phenomenon, and it's very sinister, and it's outgrowing itself, and it's hooking onto many beings, especially the important ones. They don't care about beings who don't have this on their mission, on their scope, in their own personal agenda or their blueprint of the soul. They're only after the powerful ones. And some people feel very vulnerable and weak, but within them is still maybe a powerful, fierce lion. It just hasn't been unleashed yet, or a dragon, I don't know, whatever your preference is. But the reason it hasn't been unleashed is because there's still outplay of this. And you will never know who you truly are unless once you step on this path fully, okay? So for me, this transgression, as difficult as it was at first, and painful, and my goodness, I don't want to go into it again. But it was the greatest blessing, because it got my human self, Polona, version of Aurea, to wake up about things that no one else even knew about. The level of this phenomena and how dangerous it is. It's not just, oh yeah, it exists, so what? It's going to go away. Just focus on whatever. No, you have to literally do the work. Because if you don't know what true tantric life force is, and that is sacred, that belongs only to you and no one else, then you're always going to put it in your job and your toxic partnerships to others, like give it away. And that's because there's not enough self-love. And people think, well, I'm here to have this purpose. Well, the first purpose is your God's love for you. It's your self-love for you. And sometimes there's people who will be thinking they love another person, but they're just obsessed because they don't really truly within themselves first have self-love. You have to be so full of yourself, not full of yourself like in, ished, but you have to be so full and radiant of this creative divine life force. Like, I'm like this, I'm enough, but I know I have a purpose. I know I'm in this divine union, and this has always been my journey. It's just been a very long one. And the reason why it's so long is because of these sinister forces, right? And they're trying to create breakages and playing out and come in between these divine couples and these true divinely orchestrated unions in different ways. I'm not going to say everyone's example is the same. They're all different. But they're trying to come in between and create this, hooking us into other realities, other partnerships, which are actually counterfeits. Each one on this path has either just one, some people maybe have two choices, but these are always sacred. It depends, right? Because God knows the bigger picture, and we have to really know ourselves as God to feel what God is conveying to us. And it's often revealing this partner to us, right? So what I've also come across, besides this whole obsessive one, right? This principality, this being who's trying to harm me and abduct my own union, right? I also came across this information that darkness, they, transgressors themselves, even Lucifer, they never actually knew who my true beloved is. He was hidden. And the funny thing, just before today, I went out here to record this video. I was watching a reading when I was, doing myself, making myself ready. And the woman who's very aligned, channeling through the devotion to God, she was saying that the devil always orchestrates this in a way to bring you counterfeits and say, yeah, this is yours, just stick here, be there, stay with that. Like, for example, people who've been in long-term relationships that are very devoid of love, they're only together because they either have fear of being alone or making a change, or they don't want to grow and they like it steady, they like the comfort zone, but they don't actually grow together, because true union is about mutual growth and expansion into the infinity of your divine potential. When there's no such thing as that, it's usually karmic. Because all divine relationships, whether people call them soulmate, twin flame, I really don't care. I'm not about the labels, but I'm about the word divine and illumined. And it is sacred and holy. And how can someone who has that holiness within them, like I was always the immaculate one, how could I be with someone who's very greedy and focused on the material? Never, right? So for me, it was difficult to be in a partnership as of yet. But the thing is, the fact is, I was shown darkness, never knew who my true counterpart and my partner, who's God chosen for me, which is the kingdom spouse, right? The kingdom partner. That's how some people who are Christians call it. And I like that term, actually. It really resonates because it's the one and the only that God's chosen. But God shows us the impression of that being. It shows us the characteristics and the attributes, and you feel them in your heart. And I don't even try myself to communicate with that being. I don't even have a telepathic connection to them, because it's not supposed to be like that. I was learning a lot about this, because darkness learned how to hijack even what we call the telepathic communication. And now, as you see in this twin flame communities, everyone says, yeah, you have a telepathic link with your twin, blah, blah. A lot of that is a distortion. The voices telling you things, it's not that. And you have to know, darkness is so skilled right now. It managed to infiltrate in the people's vulnerabilities and weak spots, because people here in their bodies were not wanting to first do their own healing, integration, and stepping into what the true Christ embodiment is and becoming divine children on earth. They first wanted that one, right? Addiction. So I was single and I knew I had work to do. I didn't want to start the wrong way. And people want to start the wrong way and think they're going to get to divinity. No, they're not. Because you have to start with the self and build from there onwards, right? So the reason why humanity was so vulnerable, because everyone was so attached to having someone or needing someone, and that made them susceptible to these energies saying, okay, here you have it. This is what you get. And these karmic energies, they're never about growth. They're never about the true, honoring of each other and pushing each other's buttons to keep on growing. So people rather have someone who never tells them the truth, who's always, like people who just are together for the sake of being together. But true togetherness is of God and belongs to people of God. And so the darkness learned many ways and methods, and we're going to read about one very specific example today. I just want to say I'm very lucky and blessed, because I've seen through it all their BS and all that we're trying to do. But as Aurea's incarnate, I had to learn, because my growth is experiential. I can't learn anything mentally, right? It's not an intellectual download, as people call it. That's not how things go. You have to go through the progression of your own experiential wisdom. First understanding, then attaining, then mastering, then truly embodying, right? That's how these levels go. And when you truly connect to your divine one, your divine counterpart, the union that God blesses you with, because we all have these counterparts in spirit. Mine is always there in spirit. But when it comes to the earth embodiment, what will be the manifestation of that essence, of that illumination moving into form, just like I moved into form as Aurea, right? That only God knows. And the closer you move to God, the closer you get to that feeling, And I lived like a hermit 7 years in those Alps when we still had that life in that village. And I always knew my beloved for all those years. Since the first day we moved there, I've gotten the impression I was shown. And it was difficult, right? Because I had to live as if, and yet being alone and doing my own work and growing. And I never once was separate from this energy. I never gave in to lesser relationships, people who just wanted me but didn't even know me, didn't even know what I'm about. And I always just easily surrender them and let them go. But it wasn't so easy once the transgression began, and we're gonna go into this now. So what I'm trying to say is the closer we get to union, the more these attacks are happening, the more these hook-ons and overlays and all these things are happening. So the way this happens for me, I had to be transgressed because I was already so aligned. Remember when I shared with you in 2019, I was almost just right on the verge of union before transgression occurred. But I'm actually happy it happened, because otherwise that wouldn't be my full self. And I was just told now that I'm completing this transgression chapter in my life, like the dark, sinister part of it is now I'm free to just be myself, but I'm better than before. I'm even better version of myself because I went through it. I went through it all. And now it can be the gift to the world. I wasn't yet able to be before. I was a gift to myself. But now I can be also the gift to the world, because I went through all of these stages and I have deep understanding how this works. And people who think, oh, this is just BS, this is just a make-believe, I always say, then enjoy the rest of the play out, because it will get nastier and uglier. These beings are not to be messed with. But once you know who you are and you know your true power, you eventually will not be to be messed with. And that's where I am right now. And that's when Laoyan was trying to say through the channeling. He was saying, now you're a shield. Now you're a force to be reckoned with. But you have to be so devoted to what this true love is. And people who don't know it first through love in their hearts, they will not get it. They will not create it in this life. They're going to steadily progress towards it, of course. But they will still need lots of lessons. Some people still have lots to master, and quite a way to go before that attainment. But some of us are so close because we've done the work. And the work is this inner flame, this devotion to the flame of God. And in this way, you know you're beloved. You know you're beloved through the flame of God. And how can it be any other way but two people who are of the same devotion to the divine? How can you have someone like this and someone immature? You can't, right? You can't have a wise one and immature one together. You might love someone. We all love many people. We have loved many people. Doesn't mean that they're your divine partner, right? And for me, the way I stayed in the communion with the beloved is through knowing. This knowing was of essence. I just always knew. I knew his traits, his qualities, because these qualities are also my qualities. And if someone doesn't have or embody these qualities, they're not my beloved, okay? So it was easy for me. Doesn't mean darkness hasn't played hardball with me, right? Still tried. It always tries, until the last moment when you're like, gone by, that's it. But they do not know. They never knew who my counterpart is, and it's very difficult. And today I got that same information in that reading. The one was talking about that the people who are very sacred, darkness, the devil doesn't know their beloved and is trying to, because they can't figure that out, it's trying to send, at least what they can do is send counterfeits. But when you're so much in yourself, how can you take a counterfeit? Don't you know yourself? Don't you know your beloved in your heart? So the way I communicate with my beloved and I feel him most is when I write poetry and sing beloved songs, because that's the purest form through love that no one can abduct, can take away, can hijack. When you think in terms of telepathic communication, right, you hear words and sentences. Hey, there's beings who can mimic, who can reflect, emulate. I'm going to talk about this through my own example at the end. But what I want to do now is I finally want to get to the reading. Sorry, guys. I'm so excited about it. My hands are shaking because it's so good. So when I went through this last wave, I really think it was the last wave because I was getting confirmation about this. And actually, on the day of the equinox, I felt a huge Eros explosion in my body. And I knew, I finally managed to move back fully into the body, because what transgression does, and I'm going to talk about this first for you to understand, I was transgressed because, as I said, I was already in this state. Nothing could get me. So they first had to transgress me. What is transgression? And how it's different from Inception. I'll explain this now. Transgression is a usage of energetic technology, right? So they have these rays and death rays and altering frequency waves. They oscillate through our bodies, and for me, right, they came through these little body channels, and they move through the etheric body and the twin of your body, right, the etheric twin, and then they move into your physical body. So these energies distort your natural prism of life. You can no longer receive and be directly connected. So that's what they did to me. And I was transgressed just before being in that union fully, right? And I was they told me about 80% in it, and then I was transgressed. It was really sad. Then I thought later, I had to start from scratch. And they said, no, that 80% was already built. You just need to go back, establish the prism of life again, intact, because the transgression weakens, right? It weakens the influx of that intelligent light, illumined light that comes from our own natural body vortices that actually, through which light oscillates to our prism of life. And when this is weakened, it's distorted and weakened, it's difficult, right? We have to use a lot of power, a lot of will to regain our connection. So when the natural frequency is compromised, right? It's compromising us. That means it's easier for us to get these distortions. So what they do, they use these inceptions, which are basic. What is an inception, right? Did you watch the Dream movie, right, about the dream realm? Inception is like an altered version of a reality. Let's say they can write any story, put anything in it, like an inlay, right? Remember my family of light talked about inlays. They're not the same as implants. These are inlays. They're like overrides, right? They override around something, and basically they all come through your plexus area. I talked about when I had transgression release, it always begins with the plexus, and it's push and pulls because the body's trying to eliminate the host that's in your body. It's hosting in your body, and it's not an authentic energy, right? It's not organic, and it's not from your divine intelligence. So it's like an intermediary, like an inlay is like an intermediary. And so what it does, it tries to prevent and it tries to infiltrate, so you can have a direct connection with source, with yourself, and then with your beloved. It hijacks that natural connection and flow. And Inception is then that which it's written in your encoding, in your blueprint, literally, and it goes into the wiring, comes through the astral, right? Body hooks into us through the plexus, and then it moves through the entire gridding of your body. So there's going to be different points in the body that they need to be degridded or decompromised, literally. And these things take time. That's why I said you can't just go to healer, they'll cut a cord. And no, especially when it comes to transgression, it's you have to do the work. You do the work of life force mastery. That's why I first, before the transgression happened, I was unveiling all this knowledge, and now it's an add-on to it. It's the spiral teachings, right, that I unveiled and packaged on Patreon on the advanced level. And anyone can always access that, okay? It's very important, because this, I think, is the only way to truly heal this phenomena, because that's how you gain your power back. You understand how the spiral of Christ is the most powerful tool, creation tool in this universe, because it's how God operates, it's how God creates. And if you know how to create like God, then no being, no sinister force can go against you, right? So first there's transgression. It's an alteration of your frequency, your channels, and it hijacks the channels. Then an override can happen through inception, and then it's manipulation through control. But the reason why we can be manipulated is because within ourselves, we're not still fully healed, right? We're still going towards our healing. And we have points of vulnerabilities, or these emotional knots, and through these vulnerability points, darkness can hook itself into us. And I talk about this more extensively in my Patreon content, but this is the way they can get us. If you are already in your lumen prism of life and you're all embodied, nothing can get you. No death ray, nothing, right? The reason why it can get you is because you're still going towards it. You're still doing it, right? You're still in this vulnerable period. So I guess when I was doing it for the first time back in 2019, and I was very close to it, I was still at the vulnerable peak of it. And that's where transgression could occur. But behind it all is the lack of self-love, and knowing that we're enough, that we're worthy, that we're a child of God, that we don't have to do to strive, which basically keeps us always in the state of control. Darkness is of control, so control attracts control. And everyone now in this realm still holds a level more or less of self-control. And self-control is every time you don't love yourself, you don't value yourself, you don't treasure yourself like the gift of God, like the divine being, a divine child. So that will be in the next video, okay? And I think I explained this widely enough for you to understand the difference between transgression, inception, manipulation, control. There's like levels, right? So this last stage, when I got this triggering, brought me there was this impulse, and I had this influx of Eros light, and I knew there's a shift. I always feel a shift when my tantric energy elevates. And something that I was still working on, it was on replay this whole last week, and I suddenly snapped out of it just by getting this email, like, oh, this is it. And then I took my notebook, just started writing about it, okay? So this brought me, I'm going to start reading from now. This brought me to this instant knowing moment, and I stopped fighting the energy that I was still trying to understand, right? What's this last wave? Because I was asking myself, yeah, but why this? Why can it still come? What is it about? For me, when this was being done to me first, I knew it's never about the person. When they tried to do the rewrite through, I knew there was an energy that was in between. It was always trying to come in between. And I knew I had to understand why, and the why is because I chose it. I wanted to know how it works to help others. And I did it consciously. And the moment I realized that I was in my mastery, I was in control of myself, which is not self-control, but being in control through the sovereignty of who you truly are. So this brought me to the instant knowing moment, and I stopped fighting the energy, resisting it by needing to know, right? That needing to know keeps you on a wheel, and it's spinning and spinning and looping. I talked about this before, how the darkness keeps us spinning by us needing to know. It's like understanding comes when you ask God, you pray, then surrendering to God, and then in a spontaneous moment, when you simply live your life, it comes. But you in no way, shape, or form can start obsessing about it, because that will never be good. The need to know or understand actually brings the resistance to the energy itself, which gradually amplifies its potency. A cycle per cycle, you get upset and remove aspects, but inside the empty wound space still remains, so the energy can still have some hold over you as a hook or pull. The overall healing has to be a combination of a breakthrough work, liberation work, and then embodied self-love, deeply moving through it into the body, right? So when the reflection stage is complete, that means that the reflection of awareness reaches our physical, or the body elemental, right, which is our physical body, cellular structure of the body resonates, and you get that, oh, you know, when this happens, it's complete, until you're still like, oh, but still something's missing, it's still more, you're still amping up for more. But for me, when the cellular like release and at the same time collapse happens, it's like it's like I get a rewrite, right? And that's, I did it myself. I did all the steps, I walked through all the steps, and then it's complete. So that's a combination, and then it moves into the body. Being patient with it, because only once the threshold is built, the reflection or the energy of the withdrawn, or the moon, right, which is the opposite of the sun, because the moon reflects the sun, will reach the physical body and its cellular wiring. The clarity will come into the body. Before that clarity moment, the understanding will not yet be complete and therefore perfected and whole. However, it's our human self that needs to get to this clarity on its own, so our spirit or higher self has to let it unfold and pack this wisdom gradually. That's why sometimes it can't just be like this, right? You have to patiently go through all the stages that the physicality needs. That was it for me in this cycle, and the moment of the eros, of the hit, of the maximum potential in the embodiment, when the new level of lumen light intelligence reaches the human body. Now, I'm going to talk about, this was just about the processing. Now, this main channeling begins about what they do through these couplings and how they're trying to prevent union, okay? So, I hope I still have some sun left, because then it's going behind the trees. So the key of this inception is this. It deals with union, trying to prevent the star-born illumined union and rewrite, and write via program reversals into our own body matrix the code of a false union. This false union code can't just be written in so directly. So these makers or programmers, basically the archons, right? They use a karmically situated individual, usually themselves in a toxic karmic situation, partnership, and try to forcefully pair a star being who's on their path of ascension with them. This is done, as I explained, through the plexus and the astral hooked in link. And there's several then amplification of that link. So all of them for me was a very gradual release, layer per layer. And I thought it was over, and then the next wave began. I'm like, oh no, not again. And you will never know how many, because it's hidden and it's very invisible. And that's why human beings had to be so patient with this. And they just knew that eventually it would happen, right? Cycle per cycle. So through this astral plexus hooked in link, the makers of the code are able to communicate directly to both parties, spinning them through their own impulses, overriding their free will. So they're thinking, oh, I'm like doing this or saying this to you, and not of their own making, okay? Many times not. Because they are the makers of the code, they can do that. And they can do, say, imprint as a vision even, or telepathically, whatever they want to achieve their goal, perpetuate a false union, a toxic union, and prevent a true spirit mate counterpart chosen one by God, in order for the Illumined Tantric Ascension to not occur within the coupledom, right, for their completion and coupledom in ascension. Usually they use one unawake and unaware individual who channels dark impulses directly still through their own life prism, which is still distorted and incepted, right, because they haven't done the healing, while the other one is a self-born star being who gets pulled into the other one. The first subject usually has dark entities around them in their field, or these entities already possessing them gradually, or, depends on the level of toxicity. These are usually sexually linked, very toxic beings, fallen angelics, like I've talked about, incubus, succubus, right? One is feminine, the other one is for the masculine. Just browse about it online. You get all the information, right? Their names, incubus and succubus, speak on their own, right? They suck on the life force, right? So that's what they do. They drain. And when you're drained of life force, you can't think straight because you're lacking life intelligence. All your light intelligence is in your life force, right? So you can no longer know. And you're like, oh, maybe this is it. Oh, maybe that's what I'm supposed to do. Oh, maybe that's who I'm supposed to be with. Or you start spinning, right? And yeah, their names speak on their own. The other being is usually a healer type, empath, or starseed, as we now call them. And so we have now a classic, nowadays widely spread, everyone talks about this relationship dynamic between a narcissist and an empath. These sexual entities or fallen beings such as suck the life force out of these confused, hijacked, and distorted connections, which always feel super draining, hard, difficult, and even obsessive and compulsive. It's usually done via a perfect match of opposites, seemingly so. which means they find the right one, which will be temptuous for you for some reason, because they know you. They know usually your weak spots, or people, their liabilities, or people you care for, and they think, yeah, perfect match, in their world, in their sick, twisted little world. And one a healer and yet not fully healed by themselves, right? The wounded healer, while the other karmic, suppressed and wounded, who hasn't done the healing at all, not yet on the path of self-love and inner child healing. That's how these connections can even happen. The healer type in the energy dynamics is usually shown that the others is their own counterpart or soulmate or whatever, and they need to save them by somehow sacrificing themselves for the union, right? You see how this often plays out in this whole twin flame reality, and people are so obsessed with this. And if you think, oh, I'm not about this, well, then maybe you're still in a karmic situation, because somehow I'm shown that most people have a level of this distortion. Just, it really depends on where you are and how powerful one you are. So sometimes they're even shown how God orchestrated this and asks this of them, and that love is such a sacrifice, which isn't truly further from the truth. It is the exact opposite, because God never asks that of any being, as everyone is only here to liberate themselves and their own human child. Unlike Illumined light beings who have intentionally chosen to become embodied to uncover this phenomena, such as myself, bring it to God for deliverance and show the way to others, fellow star beings. So just recently when I was meditating, and I said, God, why is this even happening? I don't understand. And God said, I never wanted you to heal anyone, or never wanted you or needed you to liberate anyone, right? It's not possible. It's not, no one's responsibility. God said, I only wanted you to feel that you're always already absolutely free to do whatever. Just be you. In that, my seeds of illumination are always planted, and whoever will choose to grow from them and to liberate themselves will, and who will not, it's not my responsibility or choice. Only God can see or oversee that, right? There is something that needs to be known first about this. This toxic engagement is not a relationship. A lot of people say, I have a relationship with this person. It is actually merely an energy dynamic. It's not the same as a relationship. It is an energy dynamic, playing out as inception, which is difference between inception and transgression. I already explained. Transgression is first that you're weakened and then you're incepted. Then this phenomena, which is what this is anyway, is also being masked or veiled as a dysfunctional yet purposefully healing twin flame connection, or soulmate, higher soulmate, whatever they call them. The chosen one, right? The false chosen one, the chosen counterfeit. This also couldn't be further from the truth. Yes, there are chosen divine pairings for each of the star beings as the chosen ones themselves, and they're here and they're rare. But these have nothing to do with this widespread phenomena, inception and distortion, an abomination of God and his or her will, and the takeover of the human free will. This is a disease, a toxic sickness that can only spread wide when the mind is fragmented and man is not whole, where there is unhealed trauma and separation within one in their core. So you're not yet fully spinning around your core, right? For me, I was. So they had to transgress me first for me to be weakened and be like confused all of a sudden. Wait a minute, what is the truth? And that was funny for me to look back in the past and go through that. But it had to be learned. I had to go through it to feel how others are feeling and why they're feeling this way. Otherwise, I would just be mentally assessing them. I couldn't really feel from my own core what I experienced. Okay? Yes. So because one is not whole within the core, otherwise the inception would simply not work. It can only work in an unhealed space where there is no God, and true contact with one's illumined, immaculate soul through God as life primordial intelligence. This disease of the fragmented mind that humanity has been in for eons, right? Humanity is truly diseased, as you can see. It's so much separation still and fragmentation. Is only a fertile ground for such raw and forceful infestation. For that's all it truly is. When one knows true illumined love, partnership, and cooperation within oneself, this infestation cannot occur. And once a human is fully anchored into their illumined life prism, right, we talked about this, of the sovereign Christ creation and illumined seed design, this cannot be done to anyone, to one, specific one, such as you, me, everyone, right, anymore. So my own transgression experience of this, right, I told you was exact. I'll give you some examples towards the end if I still have some sunlight. And why for me this could happen, because I was transgressed, otherwise it couldn't. I was told, oh yeah, that was 2 years ago, right? I was told 2 years ago, it was in 2020. No, it was a year and a half, let's say, that I would meet my true love counterpart when transgression work would be complete. And this is it. It's happening now. And the only way I was never able to be transgressed and incepted fully, it never fully worked on me, right? It was a trial of it. And it kept me in error, in spinning and looping, but it wasn't a complete destruction or abomination in my case. And that's because of my direct illumined embodiment and connection, which was already an established union and heritage that I brought forth in my embodiment. The key then is for the human child to be victorious in this liberation and deliverance, that has all the required knowledge and awareness to shift, and then the inherent intelligence to reverse this inception and the spell. The key is prayer, returning to God, to source of all life, regular fasting, if sometimes you're called, or just a healthy diet, non-meat diet, right? Because that's toxic. But mostly self-love, patience and compassion in this process, but also doing the work of raising the light quotient, right, which is the life force intelligence, and the spiral work. The reason why the karmic component is there and able to be manipulated is when lower human traits and impulses still exist within one, like lust, greed, jealousy, anger. For example, a human does not thrive in low density vibration or loveless in materialistic conditions in their life. Where there's a lack of true love and true morality, which is the integrity of soul, darkness can invade, and it will invade, be sure of that. And yes, truly many have been invaded and literally put to sleep, to lack proper time, self-care, and investment to break through the spell. That's why people are so hooked into jobs and stuff. They always have to handle physical stuff that they can never just get around to break the freaking spell. It's hard, but you can do it. If I could, anyone can. Remember that. So they keep on spinning in circles and not doing the necessary self-love work of God, true communion with God, divine, illumined beings, and the lumen realm. Many are called, remember that, and so few will be chosen, which means they will choose to wake up themselves, break the spell, break this toxic connection, sober up completely and start a real organic life, a life of God, of union with the truth, selfless service to the divine Trinity of Christ. Self-love, right? A life of love. You can have true love. Anyone can. Instead of endlessly and hopelessly being themselves deceived and sacrificed by the fallen beings. The time is now. The truth was told. Be wary of false prophets who publicize for the false light and advertise them tirelessly. By many channeled readings and others' information that's not God-focused, because they get one hooked in so easily. Why? Because they keep telling them exactly what they believe they want to hear. But it's never the truth. They know of each being's vulnerability, their weaknesses. They are angels, after all, and yet fallen ones. Imagine what happens, though, once a humble human heart knowing true love and illumination can defeat them, only by knowing themselves fully in God. Imagine that. It happened. Yes, that one is me. That's what I wrote down. Polona, Aurea, dawn. And may there be many to follow in my path and my footsteps. Thank you. So I wrote down all of this specifically through the consciousness of Aurea and Aurea, and the greatest lovers, in my opinion. They're the most beautiful Elohim couple. They're so devoted to people of the true lineage and light heritage to step into these unions. And before I go, because the sun is behind the trees almost, I just want to say a few examples of my own, right? So what was done to me after the transgression was, actually my family of light told me actually about this person that they try to hook me into the spinning, right? And it wasn't so much about the person, it was about the energy pulling into me through them, because the person was still in low vibration, right, in a toxic situation. And I didn't understand it at first, because I thought, oh, I'm here to help them somehow, you know, and it was spinning around that at first. So that was done. Then there was layers and layers I had to get. And my family told me, they said, well, we've chosen them, but the dark ones reversed that. They made it about them, and they tried to hijack that, because it's always like that. We do something and then they try to hijack it, because they literally have no true intelligence of their own. So they're telling me that there's a deeper reason, and I'm not to know, and it's going to be stages and levels, but that I have to surrender in each of the cycle. That would be difficult, because the more I saw through it, I even saw things in dreams. What they can do, they can produce fake dreams, they produce fake guidance, they tell you words. And in one of the dreams that was last year, around this time in the springtime, I had a dream in which this person was telling me something beautiful, you know, like sweet words of nothing. And it was something like, oh, I would want to or expect to hear from someone like that. But then I saw a spinning wheel. Remember when I told you that that's the transgression? It's kind of like hypnotic. That's how they hypnotize. And I always see this wheel, and I know it's them. And luckily I have a gift of foresight and seership, because I'm so pure in my heart and so faithful to God, so loyal. And so I saw through it, and I even saw the voice was different, like, and it was like, oh, it's not them. Oh, and I was like, oh, woke up, and I was feeling like so abused and molested. I was angry. But what these energies do, they make you want to be angry at that person, because oftentimes they would pull you in your hooks and your strings, and they would tell you even physically things that you think you want to hear, or it's something like they would admire, or they'd be intoxicated or something. But it's not of love. It's not love. You know, love is when you don't want to hurt someone. You would want to, you know, walk with someone if they tell you, you know, I even told that person last year in the spring, I said, but darkness is getting me through you. Don't you understand? I don't want to be in any communication right now, because first I have to figure this out. And they're like, oh, but can I still call you? Hello, I just told you not. You see, people are still so selfish. They only think about their needs. They want the attention, they want your magnetic energy, they want whatever, you know, and I'm really not judging anyone. But people are not woken up if they're so selfish and ignorant, and you tell someone if they don't want to hear, because I think that there's a way of healing this also through the person that's being infested as well, is if you just sit down and talk about it, and you can see the inconsistencies happening, and if you just sit down, but know why these energies are making it harder and harder, because they want you to be separate and not talk. So one, who's usually the unhealed one, will always go and, you know, what people now call ghosting. They're always going to ghost and move away, and, you know, and I'm now so relaxed I can just publicly talk about it. Before I was like, I had this feeling like, oh no, I can't talk about this personally, but I have to, because these are examples of how they do it. And maybe it helps someone who goes through something like that, like a person, I don't know, who wants a session with me, or someone who has a feeling in their heart that there's something that's just inorganic here. And there's always ghosting present, and ignorance, and running away. And people say, oh, that's just stages of the twin flame union. Wake up, people. Stages of the union means the union is actually, two of us are cooperating and coming together and agreeing. And knowing that the enemy is the hidden enemy. We're not each other's enemies. I never saw that person that they kind of like infiltrated through as an enemy. I still try to help them. I always did spirit work with them. But at a certain point I had enough, and I said, no, I'm not here for this reason anymore. So I just really started rejecting it. And last year for my birthday, I really stood up for myself. And I knew I had to finish this healing. And now it's exactly half year after that, right? It's like from new moon in Virgo to full moon in Virgo. And I felt like, wow, this was a huge cycle. It's half a year. It's like no small pancake, right? It's really a huge thing. It's kind of a long era. But during this time, there was many things I still had to finalize in the whole transgression phenomena, because it's many puzzles in one same thing. It's to annihilate you and to not let you come into our lumen plan, and our lumen plan is a lumen union. So they're doing all these distortions and reversal and counterfeiting and all these things. And everything could be solvable if people were at the level of awareness, when they dealt with themselves, when to just, you know, get over yourself, stop with the and just for once think about that we're here together, that we need to do this healing as a one being. I can do it in my part, but now you have to do your part, and that one does their part, and we all need to do our parts, because if you don't, the whole will still be fragmented. The whole of the soul of humanity. I'm not a part of the soul of humanity. I'm an illumined being. I live in my own realm. I'm only here temporarily. But I came here to assist, and I was even shown that temporarily, as I was transgressed, my energy was kind of lower than before. And in that lowered vibration, certain beings, certain souls could come to me and ask me for my assistance. And as I am Aurea, of course I agreed, and I said, okay, I can do my best, but you're going to have to do your part. You know, the soul can ask you, but the human counterpart has to do the work, right? And it's not always like this. And what they show me now, they said, now that you're exiting this wave, that you're out of that, these souls will no longer be able to reach you. Because my vibration now is so high. My frequency is intact again. The only people I can actually help are those who want to be helped, who want to hear the truth, who want to come to me for information or maybe a healing in a session, or they want to join my patronage, which is basically a devotional work, right? When you can grow in your own mastery and self-attainment. That's the aim. This work has to be consistent, not just one time something and then it's done. No, there's no magic hocus pocus. This phenomena has lots of dark magic to it, and the only way to refuse it is to become a white magician yourself, to know how to work with the light of Christ in union. You want something, you don't want something. If you want this, you have to work on it. Nothing is ever given in creation. Every being, all the light beings, had to earn their mastery. I'm not, and I would not be Aurea if I didn't go into extreme missions that require so much of me. All my sacrifice for life force. But that's how I grow, and the more I grow, the more I can be assisting the whole and serving God. Things are hard. All of my missions are probably challenging. That's why I have such a wide array of this knowledge of this. Because I was not afraid of jumping into darkness. Never. But one thing I cannot stand is ignorance. Because ignorance is you first, in the first place, ignoring yourself. And saying, I don't want to know this. You know, when I was in connection to this person, I literally had a dream in which my beings were trying to convey something to me, and they were saying they do not want to know. They just don't want to know. I'm like, then what can I even help them with? No matter how much the soul asks me, I can't help. Sorry, it's up to God now. And when I saw all the distortions and the ghosting and all these things, I had enough. And at a certain point, I knew I had to walk away. Because I was also deceived by being told I have to help someone. And I'm like, no, if they don't want to be helped, I cannot help them. I can help someone who comes to me and says, please help, I need you. How can I help you? How can I serve you? Yes, I will always be available to people. But people who are mocking you, playing games with you, thinking that you're lying and you're just making this up to come out in a certain way, why would I? I love people. I love humanity. Even I'm not, part of no one is actually. It's just, right? It's an experience to be a human. No one is truly a human, right? And it's a temporary suit we wear, an experience we gain. It's an experience to be human. So in truth, no one is, but I'm very aware that I'm not, right? It's just an experience of being a human. And coming here out of pure love and devotion and sacrifice, why would I be, people, like a person once told me, oh, but I'm feeling judged and I feel a pressure. And I'm thinking, well, that pressure comes from you. And the pressure is because you built so much resistance to the actual taking steps towards your own healing. Yeah, I don't want to think about this now. Well, then when? When it gets even worse? How is this judging? This is intuiting and knowing. And if you have more information about this because you've done more work, sorry, doesn't mean you're better than someone, but you've been doing the work while they were sleeping. Does that mean you don't love them? You especially love that being because you tell them the truth. And it's often people who think they have people around them who love them. They just actually support their ignorance and their laziness. I tell people the truth, even in my sessions, but it's easy to work with me because my truth is told through love. And it's not pushing anyone anywhere. You can do as much as you want to. You can step up as much as you want to. It's your choice, basically. But I will tell you the facts of what needs to be worked on if you want to get there where you want to get there. That's how illumined beings operate. There's no joking around, and yet it's playful. But it's not a game like it's a joke. And people who don't take me seriously, sorry, I'm going to have to say no and refuse them. Because this is not funny to me, what's happening. This is absolutely not funny. Don't you get it? It's an abomination of God. And there's different couplings and different scenarios. I'm not saying all are the same. Yes, maybe some beings are counterparts and they're being turned against each other. That also exists. But I'm saying everyone needs to figure out what's the truth. on their own by doing the healing. No one can tell you, I gotta have to get a reading, who's my twin flame or who's my counterpart. No one will tell you that. And most people who do readings, they're plugging into what I call the fake Akasha, which is really, again, another layer of the matrix. It's all been falsified. But if you know the light of God, you will only read intelligence from God. If you are a false counterfeit yourself, the more you become yourself a false person, focusing on just yourself and selfishness and materialism and gains and, I don't know, material goods in your life, then you're becoming more and more of a false person too. You're losing your God nature. And that's how darkness gets you. So, and my point that was 6 months ago about, I had to literally say to the person, I'm walking away because what you're channeling is really bad and you're hurting me in the process, and I'm not going to allow, because I love myself, to be hurt this way. And you serve darkness when you're like that. I'm sorry. And I said it like this, without any shame or guilt. I didn't judge them. I don't have any non-forgiveness left. I forgave the person. I forgive everyone in the moment, in an instant. I don't hold any grudges. I simply live my life. I move on. I have to do the work. I don't have time for games in my life. I really don't. I don't take these things lightly. Life right now on earth is very destabilized. It's a lot of threats upon us. And this is not like to be joked around with, especially when it comes to union. This is so important. Do not understand when these beings that are supposed to come together, when they come together for the greater good, they're going to have so much love for one another. They're going to be so devoted to each other. And just by being with each other in that love space of God, they're not particularly going to have to do something tremendously special. That doesn't exist. That extravagance is of the mind. And that's why darkness, who's hooking these people who still don't have full confidence in themselves, they think they're lacking or they're non-deserving, it always tells them, yeah, that's not for you. Yeah, you know, it kind of lures them into these lower state mentalities. So it keeps on lessening their vibration and getting them more in projection of themselves, and they're no longer experiencing themselves. They're just emulating a version that's becoming more and more false. And in the end, you should just ask yourself, who did I become now? Because there's something that you are as a soul, and that's something on earth that you can become. And some people are growing closer to God, and some people are just getting further away. And you will see that, and you will even see it in the spark in people's eyes. Like literally, people's eyes stop sparkling. People stop smiling. People become like these nervous wrecks, depressed. I mean, I was transgressed. I had the right to be like this, but I was never depressed. I was just in such a low state. I was so ill in my physicality, so much in pain. And still, I was goofy in moments. I would never lost myself. It wasn't that prevalent. But now I wake up every day again, and I'm laughing, I'm goofy. I've always been goofy. I'm not serious like that. All masterful beings are very playful. And this is going to be our next sequencing of the video, right? About the divine child of God and how to truly be like that. Because this is a part of the union, is becoming like that. And I'm just so happy that I've went through these states. And as difficult as hell as it was, I can now help others. But first, understanding needs to come. And so today I just sacrificed my time to sit down with all of you and tell you the truth. And even spoke bluntly about my personal situation. I don't have any fears about it. I don't have any insecurities about it. I don't have any, how do you say it in English? I don't have anything on my tongue, right? I just say things. I'm authentic. That's how a source being is. I'm not afraid to speak about things. And sometimes I have to get personal. For people to know I speak the truth from my own experience. I'm not just making things up mentally. And it was difficult, because in my example, I really had love for that person. But sometimes when you love someone, you have to tell them the truth, even if they will reject you afterwards. What matters is you don't reject yourself. But you have to know how love is. And those game playings and that's not love. And when someone is only compulsively obsessive over you and wanting an instant moment of attraction or words of attention or something they'll feel better about themselves about in that moment, no, because they're not taking responsibility for their own healing. And you have to say it, because otherwise you're just perpetuating it. You're just keeping them in the status quo, and that's not helping. And I realized in that moment, I'm not really helping anyone here, especially not myself, let alone the other person, right? So it is quite a way to go for most people, because they still, as long as you still feel this lower feelings in yourself that make you really fall in frequency, you still have work to do. You have to come in your, what Christ calls, right? Jesus Christ calls the angelic human traits. That's how you are as your true royal angelic self, your master self. And that's my pathway and my aim for beings to come into that self-appreciation. And everyone has been played, it depends, because some people basically got themselves in trouble by hooking into the wrong things like drugs and being in addiction modes themselves. But I was never like that, and still, you know, the energy tried to play with me either way. See, it doesn't matter. I never engaged in non-loving sexual activities, or, you know, lived like a monk these last many years. Really just like a hermit. And I knew that this is a form of keeping myself, preserving myself from only that which is sacred as I am. But when people don't care about that, then how can you expect a relationship to turn into union? Because that's what a union is. It is sacred. Anyone can be in a relationship, but not everyone will be in a union, especially not in a lumen union. So we have to go through the blind spots, many veils still to uncover. As I'm exiting this space now and I've finally figured out how this energy works in totality, others will now need to be doing the work. As I'm completing, many will just now be beginning. That will be their cycle of moving through transgression and inception. But I have a funny example to share with you. Something happened just towards the end of last week, I think, when the energies were very dense, before the shift happened. These energies speak to me as well, right? They always speak, like voices. And there's someone, like when you wake up, before you wake up, you're in that vulnerable state, right? Just in the dream realm. Like I said, they can counterfeit the dreams as well. So you have to be so watchful. Don't take your dreams, because that's the astral. Don't take them for granted. Question everything and only go through what's something when it feels of love and when it's not. When it's a voice telling you things, yeah, this is this is that. Is that voice loving? That's not how illumined beings speak to you. When it's not illumined, it's always counterfeit. Just watch for how you feel. If you feel devastated and like a piece of isht, then it's not coming from illumination and illumined sources of intelligence. It's not from God. That's the only thing you need to know. Just follow the feeling of love. When it's not warm, when it's cold and detached and only wants to keep you in a certain mode and tell you things about you, is that energy in charge of your life, or whether it's you? So when these voices came, I was waking up. They were trying to say something about one person. I don't know who even. It was something like, yeah, they blah, blah, blah. And they tried to say a word, and it was like, you know, a person, when they make a mistake, they go like, and then repeating it. And then it was sounding like a like they wanted to say reptile instead. I was like, then correcting them. And I told them, even before I woke up, I was telling them in my thoughts telepathically, I said to them, oh, you're such losers. I said, you're so pathetic. You can't even lie anymore. I was lying, because when your shield is that intact, these energies can't even bullshit to you anymore. They can't even lie anymore. It's like, you're just going to see them as a bunch of losers when you're the victorious one and you're thinking, you know what? You haven't chosen God. You can't take my divine gifts and my heritage, because it belongs to me, because we created it. And I'm going to finish the mission that Aurea has started. I know last year in the spring, I brought forth some very sad videos because I was in that devastated mode, but I'm no longer there. 1 year has passed and I'm completely changed, and I've overturned every single pile of reversed states. I wish you all the same. I wish you to not go for the, oh, that sounds too complex. No. You know, sometimes now we're in these times when the easiest solution is not probably the right one. You're going to have to put more investment into it and do more research and really get intact, because people who are just telling you what you want to hear are not of the true illumined light, and that intelligence is very rare on earth. So take what you can, be humble and learn from it, instead of just simply denying it without even questioning it, and willing to cultivate within you and to grow you. Okay, my loves, I think that was enough for today, or you're going to get too much of me and you're going to think I'm crazy, which truly I am, but in a good way. I just love the completion of this, and I know I'm still in it and things are just still percolating, but I love the energy and I love what it's bringing me towards. And I just want to tell you again, you always know the beloved in your heart, because that true union, there's no betrayal there. There's no ignorance. There's no comparison between the two. It's just two beings just in awe of each other, in admiration of each other, respect, humility, trusting each other. When someone doesn't trust you and they walk away each time, they don't trust you, means they don't trust themselves enough yet. So let them, and then you walk away as well, because you're actually walking towards something better, something destined for you. And you know, maybe others learned something from it, or maybe they didn't, but that's not your job. It matters that you learned something. And I hope that my messages always consistently inspire you to get a little more intact, be more discerning and self-assertive in who you truly are as a sovereign being in the Christ. Thank you for watching. I love you all so very much. And as always, so much love, wisdom, and power. And the sun goes sayonara for now. So see you next time in the next video.